Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Lean Construction Blogs webinar. Today we have Lindsay and our great panelists talking about their last planner implementation. And I'm going to turn over to Lindsay to introduce the panelists.
Hello, everyone. So I'm over here at Touchplan. I'm a customer success manager. On our panelist here as well, we have Nick Lawhern. He's an enterprise director of project delivery services at Bolt Company. We have Mason Statham. He's a director of lean construction and sustainability at Yates Construction. We have Lane Bogey. He's a lean specialist at Core Construction. And we also have Mike Marchman, an operational improvement director at Brassfield and Gorey. Right. So today we're going to be talking about the walk, jog, run approach for change makers and their approach to digitizing LPS. So the digitization of the last planner system can require a lot more than just simply implementing technology. It's going to depend on change makers and buy-in from the last planners to make tech implementation, adoption, and optimization drive meaningful and sustained improvement. So in this session, you'll hear from these industry leaders who've successfully guided their teams through this journey using Touchplan. They're going to share how their organizations progressed using a walk, jog, run methodology. We're going to go through each one of those in detail to navigate the stages of digital LPS adoption. So starting with walk, this is where we're going to chat about building the foundation for collaborative planning by establishing clear process expectations supported by basic digital practices to improve reliability, reduce coordination waste. And then moving on to jog, we are going to talk here about how these teams strengthened team participation, refining production planning routines while leveraging digital data to improve decision-making, increase engagement, and build confidence in the process. And then finally, run, this last stage of the adoption stage. Here we'll talk about advancing organizational and portfolio-wide lean practices by using advanced analytics, cross-project data to optimize performance, help forecast risk, and inform strategic decision-making. All right, I'll stop sharing here now so we can focus on our panelist as I go to the first question. Up my list here. So the questions we have for the walk stage, the first one that our teams here are going to talk about, what were the first steps that your team took to introduce digital planning with Touchplan? Nick, would you start us off with this one?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. So at our company, we've been a lean design and construction company since the late 90s. We kind of got into this, and so we got introduced to the last planner system, and we were doing all the things around that and focusing on trying to take waste out of our processes. We've seen some of these digital planning tools like Touchplan be developed, and our first approach was just testing a bunch of different ones. And so we just did some experiments. We piloted on projects, different tools, and ultimately accumulated all of the information into what we used in the A3 process to really understand what the problems we were trying to solve, and then went through a really detailed effort and ultimately used choosing by advantages to make a decision that ultimately led us to Touchplan being our digital technology of choice a number of years ago after, again, piloting and studying several others in the industry. So that's where we started, was a lot of trial and error, doing the A3 CBA process, and then ultimately selecting a tool that worked for us, and that's where we are today.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Does anyone else have thoughts on that question and things you'd want to share about how it was for your teams?
Yeah, so at Yates, we were looking for a solution. We were pretty early on in our lean journey, but we knew there had to be a more efficient way to connect people to the plan, and then also do it at scale, without overburdening teams or adding more overhead to projects. The unlean way to do it. So what we did is we started with a couple of projects very similar. But what we have done is we have allowed teams to decide. So if teams wanted to stay analog early on versus transfer to digital, we allowed them to do that. So what that did actually is it created a team that already had some level of buy-in and was ready to go with it, that was willing to do it. and then kind of grew it out from there. And then, early on, we definitely we didn't focus on everything, right? We focused on what we knew and what the teams needed. We did not overburden them with that. So.
Smart. Right. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one before we move to the next?
Yeah, I'd say it was a pretty well the same approach that we had at core construction. It was more about process improvement. The common denominator for all of these is the need for the use of last planner system and dialing into that and making sure that our teams are good at that, so that if we do want that, when you're in your early stages of deciding, having them versed in last planner system makes it easier to help choose that software that you were wanting to use. Like Nick was saying, if you got the system dialed down, the tool can be interchangeable.
Yeah. Makes sense. Right. And the next question that I wanted to go through is, how do you build confidence in the team to start using a digital LPS platform without overwhelming them? Mason, I'll tee that one off to you. I think it's kind of related to what you were just saying.
Yeah. So, lessons learned there. One is we really try to onboard our internal team and get them repetitions in the weekly work plan, because things are going to come up that you can't train for. And so what's been really successful is we get our project teams, we go through many iterations of the weekly work plans and things that can come up, so they really have a firm understanding. So that's not a barrier, and our entire team understands the tech. From a basic user standpoint, we do that training maybe 3 to 4 weeks after our internal team is on board. It's very quick, very easy, low barrier to entry training, but doing it in that sequence does not overwhelm the team. It helps them get in that rhythm.
I'll add on to there. One of the first things that we did at Brassfield, we had a pretty large data center that was really the first big user of it. And when they kind of asked me to kind of come out and help, and one of the first things I try to do is just create our best practices. So, what does a good daily huddle in Touchplan look like? And let's get that on paper. Let's get it on the wall. What does a weekly work plan meeting in Touchplan look like? What are you using? What are the questions you're asking? What does good look like? And then we went from there, and actually, as it started to grow, there's another large project in Texas that was using it. And the superintendent's on the call. What's up, man? I see you. Met with him and some other superintendents to build a Brasso and Gorey best practice for Touchplan, which is now going to like volume 1 and volume 2. And Lindsay's seen that in the Touchplan crew. And Touchplan has a ton of great videos and university and how to do everything. But anybody that's on from general contractors, we always have to make it our own version, which is great. But we ended up doing that. And I think that was a good way to really help us get moving, but also making sure that we were using Touchplan or any software in the best way possible.
Yeah, I've seen them and I can attest they're great. Everyone likes something branded with their logo. You got to do that. Anyone else want to weigh in on that one before we move on?
Yeah, I think one important thing on not overwhelming people is just teaching them what they need to know. Sometimes I even find myself guilty of it when you go in to do a trade partner training with one of these softwares, is you show them everything it can do, and you turn around and you got the deer in the headlights look. If you just slow it down and say, here's exactly what you're going to do day to day. Here's what you're going to use it for. Here's the information that you guys might need to give to us, and here's how you do that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I'll just add one quick thing is that one of the things we did too is we just shared small wins. So as teams would have little small wins or find out how to use the digital platform differently than what they were doing with the sticky notes or whatever, just sharing that more across the company. So those success stories gave other people, I'll say, confidence in hey, maybe we should try this too. And that's how we kind of walked into it, is kind of those success stories.
That's huge.
Mhm.
just wanted to echo what was just put in the chat. If anyone listening in and has any questions on any of this as we go, feel free to write them into the questions box. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll make sure we have time to go through all of those at the end. Okay, next question is, what specific problems did early digitization help you solve, such as improving reliability or reducing waste? Mike, I'm going to kick that one off to you.
Yeah, I'd say for us, our average job still at Brassfield still in the 20-30 million dollar range, but it seems like increasingly we have more and more of these mega projects that are 3, 4, 500 million to some data centers that are touching a billion, or we've got one now that's over a billion. And it's how in the world do you make analog glass planer work on a job that big? That one specific one, I think, is like total is like over 1,000 acres, 10 buildings. So how in the world do you do classic analog glass planer there? It's kind of a lot of movement. And so one thing that Touchplan really has brought to that team is the availability to see the day-by-day plan across that whole job site. So one thing I know that they did is they kind of had a lot of other GCs do this. They have the job box with the TV in there, and the team would do their daily huddles in on the build or in the actual building that they were planning towards our building. Even though the trailer was a pretty long golf cart right away, buggy right away. So that's a big thing for us where I've taught traditional last planner for over 10 years now. And that's always been kind of a struggle is where do you put your analog boards? If you're using Excel, how do you keep track of all that? And there's just a lot of movement. So as we get on these bigger mega jobs, and I know a lot of you guys do like big pharma jobs are the same way, or big warehouses, you get really spread out. That's really a place that Touchplan has saved time, but also brought accuracy and making sure everybody's actually working off the same sheet of music every day, which is all y'all do in construction. That's the most difficult piece.
There. Is there anything anyone would add on to that?
Yeah, I think on these fast moving, large, billion plus projects, decisions are made, priorities change quickly. Not just in room turnovers, but sometimes in complete support buildings, when they need to come online, versus when things are coming in. So the ability to have everyone visualize that, even from a trades perspective, of I had allocated X amount of resources over here, in manpower. Now that has changed. Where am I going to find that? And being able to quite literally grab those resources and drag them into the new plan in a collaborative setting. The amount of speed and back and forth you pick up, and you leave the meeting all with that same sheet of music that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think the speed of which, like you kind of alluded to, the speed of which, in a weekly meeting or a poll planning session or how to get the information in the hands of the people doing the work is just a lot faster and a lot more efficient with using a digital platform. And that's a lot of the waste that we've seen get taken out of the process that we've used in the past, where it was more, having to capture sticky notes, or even if it was in Excel or whatever other technology, it was just more arduous to manage that. So that's where Touchplan and products like that have helped us.
Great. And kind of a follow-up question to this as we're talking about how we just got everything started up. I know one thing that everyone always asks me, and I'm sure you all hear this too, is how do you get past the objections when it comes to digitization, whether it's from trades who are having a hard time with adopting technology or just your internal teams saying, oh, this is different and I don't like that. Nick, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I guess the first thing that I think about is that it's a digital platform, but it can be very not digital also. So we have a lot of trades that aren't sophisticated that we work with in different parts of the country, and we just print off a weekly work plan or a daily work plan, right? It can be mark it up on this piece of paper, and then we'll enter it for you if we have to. So there's lots of cases where that happens in our projects. I'll say that it might even happen more than not happen, because the trades are um, more resistant in general to getting into something like that and updating their tags or whatever. So we end up taking on that task, but we still get it from the last planners that are doing it. to make sure that they are fully committing and that they are fully saying, are they done or not done, and those type of things. But um, it's nice to be digitized, but it doesn't work for everyone. So we make that hybrid in a lot of cases across the company, across the projects. So that's how we handle it.
Great.
I think for us, ultimately, if our lead superintendent is bought in, everything's golden from there. And a lot of jobs that we're using Touchplan, it's being led by the senior super, and it was their idea and they wanted it. And when that happens, everything works great. If you're trying to convince the superintendent, it needs to be done way before the job and get their buy-in. But I think that is ultimately critical. And then on a daily basis and week to week basis, when they're using the tool to, this is the same for analog glass planner, same for P6. It's the same for any scheduling method. It's got to be something that's led by the on-site leader. But that when we've seen it successful, no one is more bought in than the lead super, and when they're bought in, everybody else follows. And I think that's super critical.
Agree with that. The superintendent buy-in is very, very important, and project manager too, but superintendent probably outweighs the project manager in a lot of ways from the day-to-day stuff that's going on a project. So I totally agree with what you just said.
To add on to that, some of the ways that at Core, the way that we kind of dealt with some of the pushback is just telling them that, we used to use sticky notes and magnets, and it was very delineated, the information. And when we opened up Touchplan, the information is the exact same. The process is the same. The information is the same. All we're doing is now making it easier for everybody on the project to access the information. So all in all, it's going to increase our collaboration, coordination. It's going to have a lot of pluses. So that's how we did it at Core as well.
Great. And Mason, I know you're no stranger to objections when it comes to using Touchplan, and I've always liked to hear your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, so there's one is right, you train first and then you produce value. You know, understanding the people in the room and how much they mean to the process. In Lean, we normally talk a lot about collaboration and team building, but sometimes there's a reason to bring in an additional person to help someone, or potentially ask for a replacement as a worst case scenario. No one likes to bring that up, but it is something that we need to talk about. Another interesting thing about when you do it digitally, when you get a lot of pushback and you're in an actual planning session, so kind of this is a little bit further along as you're in it, but using the visualization and allowing people that voice to say, I have a constraint. They may not even be saying they have a constraint, but they're going to tell you their objections. And so if you use that kind of negotiation circle of a lean commitment and use that in your conversation with them and quickly visualize that for them and say, look, this is what it would look like. So there's quick, I think Nick said earlier, the quick wins, the little wins, right? Those are the things that can really get people on board.
Thanks, all. I knew that was going to be a question we would get a lot in the chat if we didn't talk about it here.
Everyone wants to know what's in it for them, right? So how do you demonstrate that as quick as possible to whatever level or trade, general whatever person you're talking to? They want to know, what do I get out of this? And they can see that pretty quickly if you sit down and just show them some of the things that Mason just mentioned. So
100%. Right. And final question I have for our first section, that initial rollout, is what is one tip that you would offer to other change makers who are just starting to digitize LPS at their organization? Lane, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, sure. My number one tip would be don't oversell any type of software. Focus on the system itself, focus on the components, because ultimately it's the information we're after. The software and the medium is just going to determine how we delineate or kind of disperse that information. So don't oversell the software, or, if, other than the old school. And then also anchor to one pain point. Ours was wasted meeting time. We were getting increased feedback from our trades that our meetings were going too long. And so we took that feedback, found ways in Last Planner to dial those meetings in. So listen to your trades and don't oversell the software.
Any other advice anyone else would add on to that?
So I would say embed with your team until that light bulb moment happens. There is not a, I'm going to go for 3 weeks and it's going to be perfect, or I'm going to stay for 6 weeks. You stay until the light bulb moment goes off with the early rollouts, embed with them and get to know what's working. And when everyone has that moment, that's when it's okay to go remotely. Digital Ash Planner is still in person.
I'm taking notes. This is good stuff, guys. I agree with all that. That's good. I like that comment, Mason. That's really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that engagement is interesting because every project needs a little bit more or less touch time to get things going. But the one thing that I'll add to the conversation is leadership buy-in is super key. And that's it could be your ops manager, it could be your project executive, it could be, your PM, your superintendent, all the leaders, whatever that is defined at. If they don't believe it and they don't see the value of it, then it's not going to happen on any of their projects. And so spending a lot of time with the leadership at the beginning is really key from what we've seen to help sustain it. So like when the subject matter experts that you're probably looking at on this screen right now, we can't be at every project, right? And so, but the leadership is there on every day, and the leadership is there overseeing that project more frequently and has more touch time in general. So they need to be bought in and be advocates and influencers for the team to continue to work through it, even though there might be some struggles at the beginning because it's new or whatever. So that's something that we've seen as a key component to making any of these changes or anything sustainable.
Completely makes sense. Right. So that was walk, the sections we had for that section where you're just starting to roll out Touchplan. Moving on to jog. This is where we talk about strengthening collaboration, team-wide adoption. You've kind of got a few projects going, and how do you start to really fully cement Touchplan or whatever your digital platform is and start to really see the value. So first question in this section is, how did you sustain engagement across different projects across the company? So this is kind of what we were talking about. Mason, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, so the growth model kind of that worked early for us to scale was really an organic growth model of, we did your typical beta testing and rolled it out on a project and got ready to roll it out on another. And at that point, we kind of made a decision to hold on. We haven't gotten to where we want to be yet. Yes, is it successful, but is it where we want to be yet? Are we rushing it? And at that point, I thought we would be. So what actually ended up happening is, project teams are transient. They move and go with projects. And so what we're able to do is really establish some operational excellence, best practices, and then those individual people moved to projects. And then I had those champions embedded in teams. And it may have been an APM and an assistant super and a general super. Those three people would go to one project, and the same set of three would go to another project. And so at that point, I went from one project to 5, and then in the next year, 15. So it grows quickly that way. But that way, your best practices and your buy-in and your technical, what I call touch plan operators, are there, so you don't have to retrain that. And then their facilitation is the hard part, and that's where you spend your time as a champion growing that system.
It's a little easier with each one.
Yep.
Great. Anyone else add on to that?
I'll say just more of an honest challenge. I'd love to say that it's the same way for us that Mason said, but I think just to show some reality, I mean, on our side, not reality, but that sounded bad, Mason. I didn't mean that. I guess let me rephrase that. For us, it's a little bit of, it's been a little bit of a struggle because each job is using it a little bit differently. And so for us, we built the best practice, as guidelines to kind of help people kind of have that consistency. But I think one thing that's been interesting for me, kind of in the same shoes as all these guys, is just trying to figure out how to best help each team. But how we implement it on a $15 million healthcare reno versus $1 billion data center is a whole different world. And so that's something we've been trying to figure out, and what that looks like. And on our side, on my side, that's been a little bit of a challenge. Um, so reality for us, not necessarily for me. Sorry, Mason. I love you, man.
It's the same reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good point to offer. It's not going to be the same at every organization. You might start one project and it works great, and you're like, let's everyone do this, and it's not always gonna, just move on that smoothly. So I think that's helpful for everyone to hear that sometimes it does take time and slow growth.
And I'll say this too. We'll talk more about this a little bit later. But for us, we've got like 60 full-time schedulers that their full-time job is P6. So here at Brassfield, like P6 still rules, and it's still something that's mandatory in every project. And so for us, it's trying to balance that. And so there's a little bit of the P6 monster that we're trying to figure out how to continue to work with. So anyways, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But that's yeah, it's still a big thing for us to figure out.
For sure. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
One thing that drove engagement. Yeah, we started using Touchplan right around 2020. We had a large high school project that was the pilot project, and then it rapidly grew from there. And we figured out that the success stories from each project are what really helped, sell it to the superintendents. We started having biweekly lean calls where each super would call in, and we would call on different teams and say, "Hey guys, what's a success story that you guys might have had, or what's something that Touchplan helped you guys, or whatever software you guys are using? What's a win that you guys had?" And what that really helped garner was, support from the top down is important, but from the bottom up, having those guys in the field saying, on this project, this unique scenario happened and this helped us get out of it, really helped the engagement across all of our projects.
Yeah, I guess I'll add a couple things. So one of the things that we did was once we got through our trial and decided that this is the way we were going to go, we basically worked with all the operations managers across the company and put an expectation out there that all projects, that are starting from this day forward, unless there's contractual obligations or owner requirements, we're going to use Touchplan as our production strategy and our weekly work plans, those type of things, as an expectation. So that was making it clear expectations, and making sure everyone's aligned to those expectations was a key thing for us. That it's black and white. It's in our it's in our best practices. It's in our standard work, right? This is our expectation. We also leverage the Touchplan training. So Touchplan has a lot of great training they offer in the I think it's 3 or 4 times a week, the live session for like just early onboarding, and then they have the academy and all those things. So we did leverage that, because it's another partner that can train on the system itself on how to use Touchplan. But the process we had was already existing, right? The last planner process, we call it the Bolt production system. That didn't change. It's just how do we capture the plan? How do we, manage it a little bit differently using the digital platform? So that didn't change. So that was something that already existed. And then we use Teams. So we developed a chat, or a community of practice in Teams where everyone could ask each other questions or share stories, and that worked really well to help engage the group across, all the different projects that were starting to use the platform. And it was our Touchplan community of practice that went on for a while. We actually have sunsetted that now because it hasn't been needed, and we got other avenues for that communication. But that was a big thing that I think helped people just ask their peers questions in a live platform internally that was a safe space to ask whatever they wanted to. So those were a couple things that we did here to try to help sustain it.
That's great. I love that. And kind of a similar note, what strategies help you move from focusing on tasks to making better planning decisions with digital data? Nick, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, I can start the conversation anyways. I mean, it's the nice thing about it being in a digital platform is the data is right in front of you, right? It's not go on a separate spreadsheet and track your percent plan complete or your variances. So as long as people hit that button and commit and promise, and that was one of our sticking points, and it still is a sticking point sometimes, is that projects like to have the plan and you can see it, but they don't like to make the commitment and make the promise button so that it doesn't track the PPC effectively. Um, but that's something we're getting better at. But that has been a challenge just to get people to click that button every week and be disciplined to that. But again, the digital platform of seeing that, and then we have our internal project execution assessment process that we, do an analysis of all of our projects. They have to report out their 6 week average PPC, their hot, their biggest schedule constraints and what they're doing about them, and their big, their milestone variances and things like that. They got to report that out. So having that as a company operation system that ties back into their day-to-day operations helps with bringing that digital information forward, and then we can, see all the trends and focus on the projects that need improvement and understand why projects are doing better than others, so that we can implement those best practices. So those are some of the things we're using the digital data for in-house, and Touchplans help us get there. So
I would say for a couple things I've seen that are super tactical that have been good is seen a few projects really get proficient at adding constraints to activities, especially farther out, and actually like tying them as the predecessor to the activity. And I know a lot of teams do that, but a lot of teams don't. And I think that one technical thing, and then pulling your whole constraint log, that's really a technical thing that's like helping teams plan better and remove constraints, and then seeing like a lot of our superintendents pull that constraint log, send it to the project manager and say, hey, here are the things I need removed, or it's going to affect these activities. I mean, that's just straight tactical, but that's a big deal. The other thing I've seen some teams do is use it for our internal manpower planning. Like if we're on a large self-perform job, or if we have, if we're doing the concrete and have 50 of our own carpenters and foremen there, using it to plan out our manpower for the whole entire job, and then using the manpower curves. That's been always one of my favorite feature of Touchplan is the manpower curves, and being able to actually use that and communicate with other projects and general supers to say, hey, I'm going to need to ramp up to 65 people in the field at this point. Here's my plan for it. I mean, that's hard to argue with. It's a good plan, and I think usually that's a little bit more reactive. So it's good to see that being proactive and help, obviously having better production.
Great.
So
Lane or Mason?
going from task to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Lane.
Oh, I said Lane or Mason. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mason.
So going from task to more planning. So last planner, the weekly work plan, not all the time, but sometimes is created in a silo, more of as a to-do list for a particular trade. When you use the digital platform like Touchplan, you're connecting visually those conversations that you're having. So when someone's talking about what they're going to be doing, and you have them in a particular area of the project or a swim lane, you're connecting those conversations. And the result is the weekly work plan. So you're kind of flipping that process. You're planning digitally, you're visualizing, you're seeing it, you're linking it, you're talking about the constraint. And from that, you produce a predictable weekly work plan from which you can track to. So it's a little different because in traditional LPS, you would start with a large pool plan and then work down into the weekly work plan. You still do that with digital, but what's interesting is the ability to concentrate on the weekly work plan and then build up into the make ready kind of pool hybrid, where you get a longer look ahead and you get those reporting metrics out.
One of the things we saw with the PPC trend specifically was more so of how the conversations kind of shifted. Instead of who's holding us up, it's why did this become an issue? It became shifting the blame from, like I said, why, who's the issue, and kind of changed it to what's the issue, and it allowed us to focus on problems that were more so in the future, as opposed to kind of finger pointing. So that was one thing that we really benefited from here at Core.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Right. And how did you begin integrating data insights from Touchplan into daily or weekly planning routines? Lane, do you want to start us off with that one?
Yeah, sure. So the data that we really focus on is PPC. Mainly, it kind of tells us how reliable our plan is. And so what that shows us is a trade may think that they're doing a fantastic job. They're putting in all the work, and they may be doing a great job. But our goals are outlined on the weekly work plan, and we know, by using the data, that we can kind of guess on how reliable that commitment's going to be. If we have an electrician that's consistently pushing commitments and they say, I promise I'll have it on Friday, and there's a lot of people waiting on that commitment in that meeting at that point, now there's a lot of eyes looking to you for to uphold your promise. So kind of the dashboards we use in weekly work plans to show each trade's health, and also kind of help show, hey, there's a lot of people relying on you. So the information that you give us needs to be accurate, as opposed to, making everybody feel good. I want it to be as accurate as possible.
For sure. Anyone else have any insights into that one?
Lane said it all, I think.
Does it for the
Right.
question. All right, final question for the jog section of implementation is, what advice would you give to change makers who are looking to strengthen team-wide adoption and improve collaborative planning behaviors? Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about what advice you've given at Brassfield and Gorey and what advice you might share with others on that?
Yeah, I think one big thing that we've done for that, and this is really to spread kind of adoption across the whole company, or as much as you can, and really get teams collaborating together, is we set up a monthly call. That was a few of our superintendents' idea. And so it was kind of for superintendents by superintendents, and invited Lindsay on there as well. And we just went around round robin once a month and said, hey, Jeff, what's working this month? What are you doing? What new? What's working? What's not working? What's different? Hey, Chase, what's working? What's not working? What are you learning? And just kind of went around the room. And then if anybody had a super technical question, Lindsay was there to jump in and say, hey, let's schedule a time. But what was cool, my lean heart and all of it is trying to increase the collaboration between our projects and the lesson learned sharing, and that we build off the collective knowledge of each other. And that was really a place where, hey, if you're struggling with something in Touchplan, or you're struggling with something on your job, hey, there's another guy or another superintendent that may be doing the same thing, or they've learned from that, or at least, hey, Lindsay's here, Mike's here to help you figure that out. And that was kind of a cool process, but it brought a lot of superintendents together, and then they started helping each other. And I think that's kind of always been a goal of mine, is to kind of bridge the gap and get teams talking to each other and learning from each other, and building off each other. So I think that'd be my encouragement, is don't look at it just job by job, but figure out how you can get the teams talking to each other, and learning from each other.
Yeah, I can speak to how beneficial it seemed like those calls were, especially when you have like a new person coming in, just starting Touch One for the first time on a job, and being able to just listen and hear, oh, these are other pain points people run into, or how did they handle this particular situation, and all learn from each other. It was really cool to be a part of those.
We did invite our scheduling leads on there, which was good and bad. I think it was good, but they had a lot of technical questions that I had to be like, later, guys, later. This is not for you. But I
Right.
wanted them to be part of the process, but it was good.
Yeah. Anyone else have any ideas or similar advice?
I think having a champion on each project, if is possible, is a huge win. Having that one person that each trade or superintendents can go to, that's in-house, that can answer your question and answer it specifically on that project. That is a huge help for trades. It helps eliminate a lot of the nervousness that a lot of them may come into it with. So I would say, if you can identify and train that one person on that project, that you'll have a lot of success.
I would say setting the expectations as well, for those trades. So making making some very clear non-negotiables about when things, like the easy stuff, like statusing tickets. Don't let that be a barrier. Don't let that throw you off to the collaborative part where you get the most out of it. So setting a few non-negotiables and really clear expectations early. Um, but the way that I've seen a lot of success is I did not over standardize the process. I just gave those few elements, and then the teams will intuitively, over time start to use parts and pieces of it that they need to solve their problems. So
Mhm.
leave some leniency in there.
Yeah, that's a great point, not to over standardize. That can't be stressed enough. If you tell somebody, here's the process and, no questions asked, kind of like that, doing a math problem when you were a kid, you get the same answer. But if it's, if you don't show your work the right way, it's wrong. That's not the way it needs to be. If you get the answer,
Right.
however you get there is fantastic.
I love that.
Mhm. I guess one thing that we've done that I don't think we've talked about is just contractually. We actually put some language, not necessarily they have to use Touchplan, but on the process side of it, right? That they have to be part of the daily huddles, the weekly meetings, and the how is something we'll talk about on the project expectations, similar to what Mason said. But we do put general expectations in our contracts too. That it's like, hey, you're signing up for this in our bid documents. We're all upfront, transparent with this right from the start. So it's not like surprise. Now you got to do all this stuff, right? So having that as a expectation, as in the purchasing side of it into the contracting side of it and then actually the execution side of it all the way through is also something that's helped us to just be consistent and not um, have a surprise happen, and because no one likes that and then collaboration goes down usually. So that's something we're doing.
Everyone's prepared up front.
Yes.
All right, well, moving on to run. This is where we'll talk about leveraging analytics for continuous improvement and strategic decisions. So, first question, what changed in how you measured or tracked success when your team started fully leveraging the analytics that are aggregated in Touchplan? Lane, I know we talked a little bit about this, but do you want to take it a little bit further when it comes to the rollout at core?
Absolutely, yeah. So we started with PPC, obviously measuring how accurate our plan is. As our teams got more versed in touch plan and we're closing out and using the variance reasons, one of the measured success for us is we build a lot of schools and a lot of repetitive buildings that have the same components. So for success for us was, if we found variance reasons on one project, let's say, there was a series of RFIs for, this new piece of equipment, we take those lessons learned up to our next project so that we can avoid those issues moving forward. Um, you know, Being at where we're at in touch plan, that wouldn't have been a possibility at the beginning, but as we increased our usage over time, it gives us insights into systemic issues. What can we avoid moving forward that may save us some time or save us some money, that allows that superintendent to go home a little earlier every day? So finding the things that not only better the project but the project team as well.
Mm-hmm. Like what Nick was saying earlier, is finding that value. Like, what
Exactly,
is it
finding
for
that value.
everyone?
Mhm.
Great. Anyone else have any thoughts on that one?
Exactly.
That's it. You did it, Lane. How are you using cross-project or portfolio analytics to inform broader business or organizational strategies? Mason, how has that been at Yates? I know it's like a work in progress in some ways.
Always is. But so the analytics, the ability to break that into sectors and break that into business units or divisions, um, to Lane's point, you really do start to see trends. You start to see what variance reasons affect early on. You start to see when RFIs really start to impede and come into play, when you start getting into maybe the first installs, things like that. Using it to also plan out inspections, and quickly identify when you need that inspection, but what happened in that inspection. And because the team's going to have to come back the next week. Um, and also to break some rules, like there's a couple of jobs where we have 2 weekly work plans. They're just mini. So they know we're going to meet Tuesday and Thursday because things are changing that rapidly. So that data analytics going to be in there, but that drives all the way up for people that aren't aware. There's a customized trade dashboard where the information is filtered for the trade, right? There's one for the project team, maybe one for the business unit, and then there's a company one. So by simply digitizing the process, they're capturing all that data, analyzing for you so you can make informed decisions with that amount of detail and accuracy. It's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, being able to look at region by region or however you organize projects at your company can be really helpful to see kind of what we were saying earlier. Who's doing a really good job in these areas? Who might be struggling a little bit? Where can we pair up these teams, or what can we, see about what this section, why are they doing so well compared to this one? That really helps you kind of ask those types of questions. Anyone else add on to that?
I guess I'll add that I think when you find a technology that supports the process that you want to use, which Touchplan supports the last planner system, it helps teams better follow the process that you want them to follow and follow the best practices and see the value of it. So I think that's where, again, that showing that value, showing how that works, and then having success on projects has that analytics from those type of projects and those teams have helped sell the next team and help them take it to their next project and want to just go without any support, right? So that's where we've seen it kind of grow, is that you're seeing multiple, second, third, fourth projects now, of these different project managers or superintendent teams use it because they've had success using the process within their other projects. So that's what I would say is it's kind of that rolling rolling continuous improvement loop that happens, and then they get excited and then they share it with the next team and the next team and the next team without having to have a subject matter expert, I'll say, or someone in a operations leadership role have to force them to do it or something. So that's what we've seen.
For sure. Right. And what lessons have you learned about maintaining continuous improvement after achieving digital adoption at scale? Nick, could you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what that's been like at Bolt?
Yeah, and a little bit was what I guess
Yeah,
just saying,
kind
but
of related.
I guess on top of that I can add a couple things. We have I'll say it's our Bolt production system assessment tool that we built that really looks at a project on how they're doing master scheduling, production strategies, and weekly work plans, all of the different topics within the last planner system. And it's really focused on a continuous improvement scale. So we look at, we use a scale from aware to mastery or unaware through mastery, that type of scale. And we've got this assessment that we built that basically says, 80% of the time we're at an awareness level. How do you get to an understanding level? Or how do you get to competency? And how do you get to mastery? And we kind of prescribe it so they have the roadmap a little bit of like, if I want to get better at how I run a daily huddle, and this is what you're doing right now when you're at that awareness level, here's the what needs to happen to get to the next level. And so we to kind of scale this, what we've been trying to do is have these assessments. The team does it self-assessment, and then we have subject matter experts help them with those things too, so they can have different viewpoints of it. And they'll pick one or two things to improve. And sometimes maybe it's just clicking the button in Touchplan to promise now. That's the improvement we want to make over the next month, but it's trying to make those incremental improvements and get the team to think about how they're running their projects and reflecting on the projects at a little deeper level. And it's either behavioral, it's process, or sometimes it's the technology. And so those are some of the things that we have learned, that to maintain that momentum and to maintain a continuous improvement culture, that we need to make sure we build in those reflection points to be able to help them get to the next level, to where we want them to be. So that's something we're doing to help with that continuous improvement cycle.
I love that.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any similar thoughts or?
Yeah, I think the number one tenet and the most important thing too is, we're here to respect people. We're here to respect our trades, our superintendents. So listening to those guys, having those plus deltas in your meetings after each phase pull plan with our trades, sit down and say, what could we have done better today? What's something that we did great, and actually taking and acting on those items. You'll gain a lot of respect from everybody if you just literally just listen to them and have the respect to let their voice be heard.
Love that. Right. And what is one recommendation you have for change makers who are ready to scale digital LPS across multiple projects in their portfolio? Mike, do you want to talk about what advice you would have for that? I know that's always a question people have.
Yeah, I think you got to have the tough conversations, and for us, the tough conversation with Last Planner, whether it's digital or analog, but especially it's digital, is how does it work with our CPM and P6 and contract schedule? We still always have to have a contract schedule unless someone tells me we don't, but and that's something that we put a lot of emphasis on to make sure we have right so we can plan out long-term logistics and planning and deliveries, as well as track fragments and all those different things with all the changes that happens on projects. Um, and you can't just ignore that. You got to figure it out. You got to dig in. You got to talk to your scheduling crew. You got to figure out the legalities of what all that looks like, and what you're telling subcontractors. You got to get certain things in subcontracts. So with Touchplan, you just got to be smart with it all. You got to have those hard conversations. You got to figure it out. Ultimately, for us, we've kind of come to, if we're using Touchplan, we still have a very robust and detailed P6 schedule. Um, and we've really been using the import and export tool that came out, I guess, last year. Then that's been awesome by Touchplan, and that's helped a lot. And a lot of teams are using that, which has been great. But really, our field crews are the ones leading the Touchplan effort and making sure that it is meeting or beating our P6 contractual milestones. But all that to say, there's going to be a different side, a different way that fits for everybody. But my one recommendation is you got to have that conversation, and you got to dig into that, and you got to figure that out. And you got to make sure too, you're always keeping those contractual milestones embedded somehow into Touchplan, and don't lose sight of that. I think that's still really key, and trying to figure out how to manage both is, once you get your good system, it's the right way to do it. And like I've always said with Last Planner, you got two different audiences. Sometimes P6 is for one audience, and Touchplan is for a whole nother audience. And so I think it's our job to figure out how you hold both and do a good job with both for different sets of people.
Great. Any other recommendations anyone else would add on to that?
Probably a lot of strong opinions about that.
I knew you would.
I think that's a whole nother webinar.
That's like an 18-part mini series.
Yeah.
Give me your best 1 minute summary.
So for continuing at scale for me, it's also moving up the supply chain. So just by nature, being more collaborative, you need more people, and the more collaborative you are, the more success I feel like you'll have, as opposed to being antagonistic. So moving into maybe some areas that people don't think about when you're thinking about Last Planner in the field, but moving into the fabrication times, as we look at more prefabrication and looking at fabrication level models, like when are those going to be released, and bringing MVDC and design, and like all of those touch points. It's getting okay. We're ready to install the overhead cable tray when we fabricate it, when we get the model. And so pulling off of those and engaging those people in the meetings, it's very rewarding, and to get those people involved and to build a robust plan, and then continually work on that. So you're expanding your influence, and you're expanding the use of the tool and the techniques, and of just lean construction team building in general.
Great.
I think one recommendation for kind of scaling is, with the analytics are great. The data is fantastic. My recommendation is don't chase all of the analytics. Don't make, if you're constantly running down numbers, you're missing the mark. The focus on this is in the people. So pick one insight. If it's your PPC, plan reliability, dial in on that, show them how to make this more accurate, show them how to what that number means, show them the why. If you tell somebody to do something and the answer is because I said so, they're a little less inclined to do it. So if you walk them through, hey, if your PPC is a little low, here's why that matters, because there's other people relying on those commitments. So I would say that being my recommendation is don't chase analytics just to have them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree with that too. And I would just say set clear expectations is going to be the starting point, and then incrementally work your way towards them, because you're not going to be at that expectation on day one. So don't expect to be, and it'll overwhelm the team really quickly. And so what is those one, two, three things that you can do on day one, but that's focusing on that expectation. That's what I would say.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. I think if you're trying to make every single metric perfect and have all this, then people can get overwhelmed easily. So kind of back to how do you not overwhelm the team? Start with the most important thing.
Exactly.
Great. Well, I have one final question to wrap up the conversation. And then if anyone else who's been listening has any questions about what we've talked about so far, maybe questions that we didn't get into, or just anything you'd like to hear a little bit more from our teams here, feel free to type them into the chat, and then I will open up those next and go through any questions people has, but feel free to start adding them in now. So the final question that I would love to hear from everyone on is, if you had to pick one thing that someone should take away from this discussion, what do you feel like it would be? We can just kind of round robin that one.
I can jump in. I would say, just if this goes for any software, but especially this here is be proactive. Like, have a plan, start early, and just be like, use your resources, build off the knowledge of each other, like call us. I'll say honestly, not to make Lindsay feel awkward, but she's been incredible for us. She has always been so helpful, so fast, so quick, been able to solve problems so quickly. I can't tell you how many meetings or pull plans I've been in and said, hey, like I've got on the chat or got somehow called Lindsay, and within 5 minutes she's got the problem fixed, or helped us figure out what we wanted to do. And so I would say, I guess that's two things, but be proactive, but also use your resources. And Touchplan's been awesome and how fast they can help. And Lindsay, you've always been awesome. So thank you.
Thank you.
I ditto Lindsay's help as well. I saw something the other day and it said, keep the rituals, but upgrade the medium. And so keep what you've been doing. You've been successful. If someone's been in the industry for 50 years, they're very successful over their career. And so don't just forget about analog. Just realize that you're upgrading the medium through which you're communicating, and you're letting it do the majority of the analytics and work that used to have to be done manually. So it's not just about replacing, the sticky notes. It's keeping what's there, but then being able to expand upon it and enter new areas with it.
Yeah, I'd kind of piggyback off that. Change is the only constant. If it works on with one team, it may not work on another. So being fluid and having that agile about you to be able to kind of meet a team where they're at. Some teams may have 20 years with lean experience and in the field, and the other teams may have one or two. So just learning to meet those guys where they're at, and know that change is going to happen over time. You just got to be willing to adapt.
Yeah, and I'll say people, process, tools, and tech in that order. So people, make sure they understand the why and what's in it for them, the value that they get out of it. Process, make sure you're using your best practices and sharing those and making sure that they're following best practices, and then find tools and technology that support those processes and those people, to make it easier for them to that aligns with your processes, because do it in that order is what I would say is my advice.
Love that. Well, thank you all for that. Looks like we do have some audience questions coming in. So let's see. The first one is, do you have any advice for companies whose supers are using different planning platforms, but are looking to transition everyone into a single standardized platform? Anyone familiarity with that situation?
So
Go
it's
ahead.
interesting because when you have the roles, the different roles in swim lanes and the ability to customize those, you can import, right? If they usually it's going to be done in Excel or some type of form. What we've done in the past is we've taken everyone's individual work plan or look ahead, and we've imported that in for them and given them their own and say, like, here was what you were planning on doing. Look at it in this format. and then again produce and give that to them, and then we can simply reorganize all of that into more location-based management, where they can see, oh, we were going to stack here, or oh, I didn't understand exactly what was going on the north side, or and so grabbing those and bringing those in really helps.
Great.
Yeah, I think
Oh, go ahead.
good. I was just gonna say, I think kind of what I spoke to earlier is focusing on the last planner system itself. You know, like I said, the digital platform may change. You know what the screen looks like and what you click on may change from platform to platform. But ultimately, it's what are you doing? How many people are doing it? How long is it going to take you? Just walking them through the process itself, and then as they start to import into different or from different platforms into a single one, kind of that ties back to what Mason was saying.
Having that same process that would be the same across any. Yes, love that. Next question is, please talk about electronic connectivity between Touchplan and P6 to expedite alignment between the two. I know there's a lot of different feelings everyone has about this, about whether your platform P6 should be connected. Who wants to start it off?
Since I brought it up, I'll take it. I'll say number one, like super tactically speaking, set up some time with Lindsay and have her show you how the import and export work so you understand what you can do tactically. But what we've had a lot of projects do is export out at like a basic level, like kind of the walking version, if you will, I'll use that, is to export like what you've done just in the last 2 weeks with export tool, either straight into P6 or the walking version, just to export it into Excel and then use that to update P6. You know, no matter whether it's analog last planner or digital last planner, if you're doing the daily huddles right and updating tasks every day, that's going to be your most accurate information for updating your schedule or P6 CPM schedule. And I think that's key. And that's what I've always said. You know, when we've had this discussion internally, I'm like, you know, at the end of the day, if we're doing our daily huddles right, you don't have a more accurate piece of information to update the schedule. So at a basic level, we've been exporting just the last 2 weeks of work to update P6 from. But we have had a couple teams that have been straight importing their whole P6 schedule in, or just, you know, big milestones. And then they're able to export back out and really tying those together. But I think that's the walk and jog version. There is a run version, but you'll have to get Lindsay to show you that.
I would add just that from my experience and where I've seen people, because we use P6 Microsoft Project from a master scheduling perspective, sometimes due to contract and just general practice in our company, but um, you can only go one way or you end up with two schedules really quickly. So as soon as we take a phase of work or whatever that look ahead window is and take it, I'll say out of our master schedule P6 tool and put it into Touchplan and then break it into a lot smaller tasks, typically in more of a production plan view. Don't change it in P6 anymore. It's got to go back from Touchplan into P6 to update it. If you're changing them in both places, then you're going to end up with two schedules and it's going to be really chaotic and no one's going to know what's the source of truth. Um, so that would be my advice is it's got to be one dimensional or one direction, right? So P6 then to Touchplan and then once it's in Touchplan back to P6 and it's always in Touchplan and it's back to P6. So that'd be my advice.
Yes, I agree with that. Definitely a follow-up webinar if y'all want to schedule it.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that one?
Yeah, well, we typically do kind of on a smaller scale. We're not importing many activities. What I'll do is if a team has a pull plan coming up and they're planning from first slab pour to maybe top out, that'd be a big one. But what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll filter we use Microsoft Project, so we don't use P6, but basically we filter down the dates that we need and I'll export those milestones, save my team some time, and then we'll import those into our touch plan. And what that allows us to do is that gives us our baseline. That's, this is worst case scenario. How can we better these dates? So instead of importing multiple tickets and moving them around, I kind of give them the guidelines to plan through and see if we can better that.
Mhm.
Great. All right, next question. Do any of you have any advice for how to leverage Touchplan for pre-construction planning, particularly for IPD or design build projects, those ones that require early collaboration? Anyone want to weigh in on that?
I'll just say start as early as possible. That's my advice is that Touchplan is a tool that I tell everyone if you have something that you have to do in sometime in the future that you're committing to, then you can use Touchplan for it. So our estimating group sometimes uses Touchplan for a pursuit, right? Or pursuit of a project or any phase of the project. But I guess in general for IPD design build or any type of project, it's just start at the beginning and don't just start when you're starting construction.
Yeah, I would say for us, we actually started with Touchplan, our pre-con teams. We started there and not um, actually with construction operations. And our pre-con teams were using Touchplan at first. That was our very first contract with y'all was to use it to plan out our pursuits. And then we did have some IPD jobs use it. And our lean group here at Brasfield's kind of split. We into ops side and then design side. And a lot of our folks have been doing lean and design where, they'll do a once a month design pull plan. And actually that group has been kind of piloting different digital last planner tools because they're trying to figure out how you go from that pull plan back into an action item list. And with that said, one of the struggles in the design or IPD side, IPD on the design side is I think a lot of the designers need that more action item list style or weekly work plan style tracking. I've seen that in construction, we do a little bit better with the sticky note view from a day to day. But I've seen and heard from our design side that we really need that more action item spreadsheet tracking style. And again, that must just be our style, but that's the feedback we've heard. And so the challenge there is how you go to that weekly work plan view or that action item view. And that's something you got to figure out. But they're phenomenal. It's a great use for a design pull plan and doing that digitally, obviously.
Yeah, the design side has been, it's especially too when you're dealing with that level of competency with technology, that there is no barrier for the technology. So it is all about the process. You don't have what we almost opened up with was like, what are the objections you get? How do you overcome those? That's a very low objection. And it's also very creative. Whereas if you're used to being in the very linear world of non-creative construction, do what you're supposed to be doing. It's a different type of meeting for me. Something that's a little uncomfortable for me. I'm not from the design side, but being able to stop that meeting and say, okay, listen, we have had a great conversation, but we now have to implement this. So what does that look like? And so being able to do that at key points throughout the meeting was kind of a learning curve for me, but very very rewarding and fun work.
Yeah, it's definitely a whole different situation. Let's see. This one, just wanting to confirm that the meetings are still being done in person. This is replacing the whiteboards with a digital system to aid in tracking and measuring. I'm not sure if that's so much a question, is just kind of like reiterating, that this, I think it was Mason who said this is still happening in person. This isn't like to take the place and now suddenly everything's all digital and everyone's calling in and no one's in the same room together. I don't know if anyone has any.
I've done it digital with
Yeah.
no one in the same room, and it's really hard and really frustrating, but it can be done. We did it during COVID.
Yeah.
That's the first time I've said the C word in like a year. I'm pretty proud of myself. But David, sorry to bring that back up. Sorry if anybody's like purposely forgotten that. But we did it during COVID and it worked. And we've done it when we've have to, especially if we've got a project that's spread across the country. In the design phase, that's actually pretty good because a lot of the designers aren't used to traveling as much as we do in operations. But yeah, once you get into construction, I think it's 100% of the time in person. I would not recommend doing that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think to answer your question, the answer is yes. That's in
Yes.
person.
Should be in person.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
we
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Lynn. No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say we've had some use cases to where, let's say that we're deep in it, we got the weekly work plan, all the trades are present. If we have a trade that's coming up maybe in the next 4 to 6 weeks, they're not necessarily needed right then, but we know that they're up and coming. I may go ahead and send them an invite so that they can virtually attend. Maybe they don't want to drive all the way out to the site. Maybe they're still on their previous site. It just allows them to say, hey, here's how we do this. This is our expectation. This is what our weekly work plans will look like when you get here. That way, when they do show up in person, it's not kind of deer in the headlights. It helps guide them into what they need to know for the meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with both of you. I probably don't need to add anything, but I think in person is definitely best. But we do have big rooms in design phase, like you had mentioned too, that it does work virtually, but it's better in person.
Makes sense. All right. What current challenges are you facing with your lean implementation? And what are some things that you're working on that maybe haven't been solved yet?
That's another webinar, man.
I know,
I was gonna
that's a
say, how
good
much time do we have?
question.
Stop trying to cheat and squeeze it in this one.
We got
Yeah.
some time.
So I'll go first on this one. I know a lot of people are trying to get best practices, lessons learned from everyone, and doing that and having people value that process in real time, because oftentimes we do retrospects, but they're 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. It's past, and you may lose those last planners. You may lose those project managers to other projects, and maybe they're only focused in the scope of work that they were in at the time. So that one of the challenges that I've kind of taken on, and this is a newer challenge. I'm not still a challenge, definitely not a solution yet. Is how do we get that out of last planner system? How do we get the amount of knowledge that is discussed on a weekly basis, even how do we even attempt at capturing that, categorizing it and using it again, and not just the big things that we learned, but the important things about compatibilities, or manufacturers that work better with this. I mean, just there's so much out there, that we can gain.
Yeah, Mason, I would say that is my number one focus too, man, and I don't know if it's just as the speed of industry changing, the need for best practices. And I always go back to it a way that the Lean Bible says you cannot have continuous improvement without standardization. And I've been trying to figure out how the heck you bring that to construction, where we have so much variability. But really, that's been what you're talking about has been my number one focus, number one challenge is how do we bring best practices and lessons learned and get that system and that cycle spinning and rolling, where people are building off of best practices and building off the collective knowledge. And I'll say this: the fun opportunity part of that is, I think, um, the younger people in the industry in their 20s, um, are asking for that. They're like, okay, where's the standard version of this? Where's the standard version of that? Where I think, us that are a couple years older, I've been like, figure it out. You'll figure it out. Learn by trial. You'll figure it out. Make your own version. But now it's like, no, no, no. Just like, I want to search it and get the best answer. I don't want to have to dig through libraries forever. So Mason, that's good to hear from you. That's been our number one focus too. How we bring that consistency and stability.
Yeah, I'll say leveraging AI is part of what we're trying to figure out, is one of the lean challenges, of how we leverage that most effectively for the best practices for content creation and very quickly. So we're lots of experimentation around that topic, along the topics you guys are talking. And then I think this challenge we keep talking about, P6 versus Touchplan and versus all these, all these different technologies. We're in too many platforms, and wouldn't it be nice to have one platform that just streamlined all of it, right? That everyone could live in. And I think there's still a lot of waste within technology in general because of the specialties that everyone has picked to go down. And as a project manager, you want all of it in one spot to make it easy. And so that's what we're continuously looking at within our company, is how to lean out and get the waste out of all the different platforms and how to make them work together as best as possible.
Well said.
All right, what I see so far is the last question, unless anyone else has any last ones to throw in there. Did you see a decrease in accountability or task ownership when going from analog to digital?
Well, what we saw was a jump in plan reliability for sure, because, it's everybody in the same room, even if they're not in the same room. I would say to answer the question, we saw an increase in accountability and task ownership because, it's there for everyone to see. If I print out a report, it's going anywhere. So people take pride in what they do. And so if you know that this report is going to go out to a superior or to a ownership or to whomever, they tend to have a little bit more kind of accountability in their work.
I agree that it gives the foreman or superintendent the ability to, so when either the dashboard or the Gantt or the weekly work plan, it allows that last planner to send to the office and say, this is what I'm going to be held accountable to. I'm going to be sitting in front of my peers again on Thursday at 1 o'clock or whatever time your meeting is, and this will be brought up. And so I need the material, I need the equipment. There, I mean, it increases it to that level that you can push it out. It doesn't live just on a wall
Yeah.
on the job site. Yeah. Good
And if
point.
they know that they're going to be expected to give information at this meeting, typically they come a little bit more prepared too. So, all of these kind of aspects add up to, better meetings, more efficiency, more collaboration.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Just from having dashboards where you can look at things like how everyone's doing with keeping up with status performing and PPC by role. I feel like having that additional visibility where anyone at any time can go and say, how is this particular trade doing at completing activities? I feel like from what we've seen just in the teams that we work with at Touchplan, that there seems to be actually increased accountability and ownership over those activities just because of that heightened visibility, for sure. All right, looks like that was the last question, unless anyone else has any last minute ones they're typing in here. Looks like that's all we've gotten so far. So I wanted to thank you guys for spending the morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, with me chatting here today. I think it's been a really great conversation. I know I've been taking a lot of notes, so I hope it's been good for everyone in the audience and for you all as well. I really enjoyed it.
I want to thank Lindsay and then the panel. You guys did a great job. And, in the future, we may do a presentation on current challenges because there's now we open ourselves to newer conversations. But we hope that people continue to learn and apply lean on their projects. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you again for the next webinar.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you.